Come closer, friend. The night is thick and the wind has a bite to it. But our fire is warm, and the woods, for now, keep their distance. Take a seat. There's room enough for one more. Out here, beneath these ancient trees, stories cling to the shadows like mist. Some are meant to be warnings. Some are just meant to keep you company till dawn. Rest your legs. Feel the heat in your hands and listen close. For in these wild places, the line between myth and memory is thinner than you think. Let me tell you a story I heard not long ago. They say there's a place in the woods where no birds sing, where even the wind refuses to stir the trees. A place so ancient, so cursed, that the ground itself remembers every scream ever swallowed by its mossy roots. Tonight, let me tell you of that place, of a carnival that should not exist, a carnival with no roads leading in and no roads leading out, a carnival that appears only when the moon abandons the sky, bringing with it the laughter of the dead and the shadows of those who will never leave. So gather close to the fire, traveller, for once you hear its music in the dark, there's no forgetting the Forgotten Carnival. They called him wee Jamie McArthur, a boy of 12 summers from the quiet village of Perthshire, nestled deep in Perthshire's heather-clad hills. His world was small. The cobbled lanes, the soot-stained church, and the wild pine woods that loomed dark and ancient beyond the last cottage roofs. His grandmother always warned, stay clear of the pines after dusk, lad. That's where the old things wander. But Jamie was curious, with a restless mind that churned with questions no adult would answer. He'd heard the stories whispered among the older boys. Stories of the Forgotten Carnival. An apparition that flickered into being only on moonless nights, when the sky became a curtain of endless black. It was old Archie who first planted the seed properly, one late autumn dusk as Jamie fetched bread and eggs from his crumbling shop. Archie sat behind the counter, milky eyes lost in the fire's reflection, and rasped, "Aye, there's a carnival in them woods, boy. It comes when the moon's gone, when even the owls are silent. No horses pull its wagons, no road bears its wheel marks. It just appears. And if you see it, dinna ever go in. The laughter will follow you home, and it'll never let you rest." That night, sleep evaded Jamie. The wind rattled his window with skeletal fingers. He imagined twisted Ferris wheels spinning in the dark, creaking with unseen riders. At midnight, he could bear it no longer. Grabbing his torch, he pulled on his boots and slipped silently into the blackness. The air was sharp with frost. His breath rose like pale ghosts around him as he crept down the sheep trail. The deeper he walked into the pines, the more the world pressed down upon him with a heavy hush. The needles underfoot muffled his steps. No rustling leaves, no distant sheep bleating. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Then came a sound, faint, curling through the trunks. A calliope's melody, sweet and broken, drifting on stale, cold air. His chest tightened as he pushed through the dense thicket, emerging into a wide clearing that shouldn't have been there. Before him sprawled the Forgotten Carnival. Faded signs swung on chains from sagging wooden archways. Their paint peeled like old scabs, revealing splinters beneath. Strings of light bulbs flickered above the cracked stones, their dim glow illuminating crooked clown heads and twisted prizes that sagged with damp. A Ferris wheel rose into the darkness, its cars swaying slightly, though there was no wind, the rusted frame creaking with the sorrow of forgotten years. Jamie stepped forward, heart hammering like a drum. The laughter came then, soft at first, like water trickling down a drain, then growing louder, warping into echoes that seemed to circle his mind. He passed a shooting gallery. The paper ducks twisted to face him as he approached, their painted eyes weeping streaks of black down their faded faces. The air smelled of rotting wood, mould, and something sickly sweet, like spoiled candy floss. It was then he saw them, the carnival folk. A juggler stood near the ring toss, his skeletal face lit by a flickering bulb. Hollow eye sockets gaped at Jamie as glinting knives danced between his bony fingers. The woman on stilts shuffled past, her grey skin pulled tight across her skull, head lolling with each step as if her neck could no longer hold it upright. From behind a candy floss cart stepped a clown, its painted smile split far beyond human possibility, revealing rows of broken, needle-like teeth, dripping with a dark saliva that hissed on the cold earth below. Jamie felt his sanity slipping. The laughter now thundered all around him. He saw the carnival folk closing in, the juggler flicking his blades, the clown's broken shoes scraping the dirt, the stout woman towering high enough to pierce the darkness above the treetop. He turned and ran, the world around him distorting with each step. Stalls warped into monstrous faces. Strings of bulbs flickered in time with his racing pulse. The Ferris wheel turned slightly behind him, its seats now occupied by silhouettes that craned their twisted necks to watch him flee. He burst through the tree line, collapsing into heather soaked with dawn's grey light. For a moment, everything was silent again, except for his ragged breathing. He lay there, shivering, staring at the paling sky. When he finally rose, the carnival was gone. Only pine trees stood silent, as they always had, though the ground still smelled faintly of rust and burnt sugar. He stumbled home, refusing to speak of what he had seen. Who would believe a boy claiming to have walked through a nightmare? They found Jamie at dawn, standing barefoot in the frost outside his grandmother's cottage. His eyes were wide and unblinking, staring towards the silent pines, lips moving with words no ear could catch. They wrapped him in blankets, led him inside, and tried to coax warmth back into his trembling body. But Jamie wouldn't speak of what he saw. They barely spoke at all. As he pulled off his coat to warm by the fire, something fell to the floor with a whispering sigh. A paper ticket, damp and curling at the edges, printed in old red letters that seemed to bleed into the parchment, was written, Admit 1, the Forgotten Carnival. Return performance, next week. Jamie's blood turned to ice. The date was marked clearly, 7 days from now. His fingers trembled as he tore the ticket into pieces and threw it into the fire. The scraps flared and blackened to ash. But the next morning when he woke, it lay on his bedside table, whole and unburned, waiting patiently. And each day after, no matter how he tried to destroy it, the ticket returned. A silent promise that he was marked to return to the Forgotten Carnival, whether he wanted to or not. For a week, he sat silently by the hearth, eyes flicking to the door at every creak of timber or sigh of wind. And each morning, the ticket lay waiting on his bedside table, its red letters growing darker with each dawn, as if written in something thick and drying. On the 7th night, Jamie's grandmother awoke to the cottage door swinging open. She found his bed empty, sheets still warm, and his muddy footprints leading out into the moonless dark. Grabbing her shawl, she followed the trail down the sheep path and into the whispering pine woods, calling his name into the choking silence. She found him in the clearing. The carnival was there, sprawled across the frost-hardened earth like a carcass rotting in the blackness. Its flickering bulbs burned cold and dim. Tattered banners hung like shrouds. The Ferris wheel stood silent, its cars swaying despite the still air, and music drifted from unseen speakers. A broken waltz that slowed and warped as if drowning in syrup. Jamie stood at the entrance, clutching his ticket. His grandmother screamed for him to run, but he turned to her only once, his young face pale and streaked with tears. And then he stepped inside. She tried to follow. The moment her foot crossed the sagging archway, a force like cold iron slammed into her chest. She fell backwards onto the frozen ground, gasping for breath as the pain lanced through her ribs. Through blurred eyes, she watched shadows drift between the stalls, twisted shapes with long limbs and glimmering eyes. At the very heart of the carnival, she saw him. Jamie stood upon a small stage, framed by mouldering curtains. Before him knelt the carnival folk, the stout women, bending double with cracking joints. The juggler, flicking his knives with skeletal grace. The clown grinning impossibly wide as black drool spilled from his crooked chin. Behind them towered a shape she couldn't name, something vast and coiled in the darkness, its form shifting like oozing tar. The Ferris wheel began to turn, slow and silent. One by one the cars filled with shapes, children, she realised with horror. Dozens of them, their faces pale and slack, staring out with eyes glazed like old porcelain dolls. The music rose to a shrieking pitch as the shadow shape bent towards Jamie, its voice echoing across the clearing with words older than any tongue she knew. His head dropped. The ticket slipped from his trembling fingers. As it touched the stage, it burst into searing blue flame, and Jamie fell forward into the shadow's embrace. The carnival lights flared with a sickly brilliance, and the air filled with howling laughter that clawed at her mind. She screamed his name over and over, but the carnival faded before her eyes, melting back into the darkness. Only trees remained, black, silent, eternal. She never saw Jamie again. In the years after, they spoke of the McArthur boy who vanished. Some said wolves took him, others whispered darker tales. But those who walked in the woods at night sometimes heard music drifting on the breeze. They spoke of fleeting glimpses, flickering bulbs between the trunks, the silhouette of a boy standing under an archway, ticket in hand, eyes pleading for release. And though many years have passed, still the carnival calls, still it waits, deep in the pine woods, for the moonless nights to fall. They say there's no time within the Forgotten Carnival. For Jamie McArthur, that was true. When he awoke, he was standing on the same stage where he had fallen, but the world around him was changed. The sagging curtains now shimmered with greasy colours. The rotten boards beneath his feet pulsed like living flesh. Around him the carnival folk watched with hollow eyes, their skeletal faces lit by lanterns swinging from unseen chains. The shadow shape loomed above him, vast and formless, its presence pressing into his bones with an icy dread. Voices whispered within it, dozens, hundreds, each one pleading, sobbing, screaming. It reached for him with tendrils of darkness that curled around his arms, seeping into his skin like ink dropped in water. He felt the warmth of his body drain away, replaced by something cold, ancient, and hollow. The clown stepped forward first, its ragged costume swaying, teeth clacking as it grinned down at him. Its painted eyes rolled back, and it reached with one broken-fingered glove to touch his cheek. Where it touched, his skin numbed and greyed, as if life itself recoiled from the contact. "You're ours now, wee lad," it hissed in a voice of rusted bells. "All who enter pay the price, but the boy who comes willingly, he pays with himself." Jamie tried to scream, but his throat tightened to silence. He felt his memories slide away like water poured from a shattered cup. His grandmother's smile, the crackling hearth, the scent of pine and peat smoke, all slipping into the shadows. The juggler circled him next, flicking his blades in hypnotic arcs. Each blade passing so close, he felt the cold kiss of steel. With each flicker of silver, his heart beat slower, until its thudding faded to a quiet echo. The stout woman bent towards him, neck cracking and stretching, her dead eyes weeping trails of thick black tears. She placed a spindly hand upon his chest. He felt her fingers sink into him, pressing past skin and bone, hooking around something unseen. She pulled, and with a lurch of horror, Jamie felt his soul stretch towards her grasp. "Do not fear," she crooned in a voice like rotting silk. "You will remain here forever, and forever is just the beginning." The shadow shape towered above them all, its darkness deepening. The whispers within it grew louder, rising to a wailing chorus. With a roar like collapsing stars, it poured itself into Jamie. Agony ripped through every nerve, his vision seared with black light as the carnival warped around him, tents melting, stalls shivering like diseased beasts. The Ferris wheel turning with a scream of rusted metal. When he opened his eyes, the pain was gone. But so was Jamie McArthur. He stood, taller now, limbs thin and brittle. His skin faded to grey, his eyes were hollow, filled with the flickering bulbs that glowed softly in the dark. Around him, the carnival folk bowed low. For the first time, he heard their thoughts, their hunger, their bound servitude. He felt them flow into him, accepting him as one of their own. The clown cackled and tugged at his ragged sleeve. The juggler tossed him a blade, which he caught without thought. The stout woman towered behind him, crooning a lullaby in a language only the dead remembered. And then Jamie smiled, a thin, sorrowless curl of cracked lips. The carnival music swelled in triumph. The Ferris wheel spun with new life. The Forgotten Carnival had its newest performer, the boy who stayed. Now on moonless nights, when the carnival appears deep in the pine woods, travellers sometimes glimpse him near the shooting gallery, juggling knives with skeletal grace. his eyes glowing dimly. His smile never reaches their empty hollows, and his silent laughter drifts on the stale air. For Jamie McArthur is no more. Only the carnival remains. Long before Jamie McArthur was born, before Pitcairn's cottages were laid in stone, before even the Romans carved their roads through the heather hills, the clearing in the pines was feared. The old ones called it the Black Crossing. It was a place where the veil ran thin, where voices slipped between the worlds like smoke curling through cracked beams. Hunters avoided its moss-choked paths. Shepherds warned their children to never chase straying lambs near its silent hollow. For at its heart lay something that was not born of this earth. In the time before written word, a wanderer came. A ragged man, half-starved, eyes fevered with visions. Carried only a battered drum and a cracked flute, and he sang as he walked, songs of such dissonant beauty that birds fell silent in the trees. They say he knelt in the clearing and played his flute to the shadows until the air grew thick with crawling fog. And from that fog stepped shapes, tall thin-limbed figures with faces hidden behind masks of bone and flickering lamps for eyes. They circled him silently, listening. When his song ended, he raised his drum and began to beat out a rhythm that shook the roots beneath the earth. The masked figures swayed and danced in impossible shapes, their movements leaving smears of darkness in the air, like tar brushed across moonlight. Then the wanderer spoke words that blistered the grass where they fell, words to bind and bargain. He asked for power over men's minds, so his songs would enslave kings and queens. The masked shadows tilted their heads in unison, and from their silent circle came a single whisper. Then let there be an audience eternal. They took his flesh first, flaying it from bone until only his spirit remained, writhing in agony. They bound him to the clearing, and where his drum fell, the earth cracked wide. From that wound sprouted the first crooked stall, timbers slicked with old blood. Where his flute shattered, a Ferris wheel rose, its spokes turning with ghostly figures screaming between the rusted iron struts. The masked shadows danced, building their carnival from the remnants of his mortal dreams. A place to lure the curious and the greedy, for each who entered fed their realm, and each who stayed became their puppet to entertain the next. The wanderer's spirit became the shadow shape, the vast, coiling darkness at the carnival's heart, doomed to hunger for souls forever. His voice woven into the endless chorus of the wails within. And so it remains. Each century brings a new child, a new victim, a new performer bound to the carnival's curse. Jamie McArthur was only the latest, his fate sealed by curiosity, as so many before him. Now when the carnival appears under moonless skies, the masked shadows dance among its flickering stalls, their bone masks gleaming dully in the dark. They whisper to the shadow shape, feeding it with each fear-torn soul harvested. The music drifts on the breeze, echoing the wanderer's ancient flute, calling out to the living with the same unearthly promise. Come and see, come and stay, come and never leave. So mark this well, traveller. Long before there were roads and churches, long before your kind carved borders in blood and stone, the shadows walked these woods. They still do. And the Forgotten Carnival is their stage. Enter if you dare, but know you step into a bargain struck long before your name was ever whispered beneath the stars.